TED Talk, so it's just, let's, let's go on. Okay, so what happened? You submitted your IND, everything went fine. We thank you very much. It was very well put together. We might have some comments or not on the protocol design, and we can provide you some additional information. And at that moment, your IND is active. It's not been approved, but it's active. And in our system, on day 30, there is like a switch. So it goes to hold or it goes to active. Whenever you submit your IND to the agency in our system, it's pending for the first 30 days. At day 30, until we tell the system, if we tell the system it's on hold, it's on hold, but if not, automatically goes active. So once the IND is active, you as a sponsor have responsibilities towards the agency as they're written and discussed in the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. I will focus my talk now on the responsibilities of the sponsor, the entity or the person who initiates the clinical research. My colleague Farhanag will talk after me about what are the responsibilities of the investigators. That is different, but I'm talking what you need to do for us. And again, there is a lot of paperwork you will have to do, but or a lot of electronic submissions as they're coming now. Can you hear me better this way? Even if I move my head? Good, thank you. Okay, so what happened with it? Some of the, what I'm going to talk in my next presentation is, in essence, what are your responsibilities? You need to inform the agency when you have a protocol amendment, when you modify the protocol by a new protocol, you change the protocol, you add a new investigator. What are the information amendments? What is safety reporting? And don't expect me to do a whole session on safety reporting because I'm not the subject matter expert. I'm going to give you some basic information and tell you where to go if you need more details. I'll talk about annual reports if you need annual reports. If not, one of my project managers here will send you a letter telling you forgot your annual report. What happened with the inactivation of the IND and withdrawal of the IND. And again, because this is from the regulatory standpoint, in many of them you will have the reference to where is the located that requirement in the Code of Federal Regulations. As I think that Kevin said yesterday, the regulations for IND under 21 CFR 312, for NDAs is 314, and 600 for biologics. So let's assume that you're going to try to do a new protocol. You submitted your IND with one protocol to study your drug in community-acquired pneumonia. It's an anti-infectives. 30-day pass, everything is fine. And you want to submit now a protocol, but instead of studying community-acquired pneumonia, you want to study hospital-acquired pneumonia. So related indications, similar, or maybe a higher dose or not, similar. So you will submit a new protocol to the agency. A new protocol should relate, again, always, 1571. You need to submit it. This is part of your cover letter. And it will be there's different check marks in the 1571, so you will put it as a protocol amendment, new protocol. You need to include a copy of the protocol and a description on how it relates to what we have before. Is it new indication? Is it similar? Has it a similar pattern? Is the therapeutic doses you're going to use higher or low? And you can include that in a cover letter. That study can begin as soon as you send the information to the agency and as soon as the protocol has been approved by your IRB or Institutional Review Board. You don't need to wait 30 days. It's go. When I receive that submission, I send it to my reviewers, and it's their responsibility to make sure that it's safe and the protocol will meet its intended purpose and we have enough sufficient information, especially probably in the non-clinical, to go to a higher dose if you want to go, or if you change the formulation, if the chemists have to do it. So, but in essence, you can start the following day, potentially. My recommendation is, well, build it in your system for a few days in case we have some comments to provide for you to get a better protocol. But by regulation, you can start anytime after the first 30 days of your IND. The second thing we're going to do is you decided New protocol is clear. It's simple, straightforward, no major problems. What happens if you want to modify your protocol? Let's assume that, let me go to when are you going to modify the protocol. The next slide will show the cases. For any phase 1, any changes that affect the safety. Phase 2, any changes that significantly affect the safety of the subject, scope, and or scientific quality of the study. This is what is by definition. And the next 2 slides will tell you why. In this protocol change, again, you send the form 1571. It's going to be protocol amendment, changing protocol, because we are changing the protocol. Again, write in the letter what is the new protocol, how it relates to the original you had. If this is the first change, I find it, my reviewers find it very useful in the cover letter. Some of the sponsors says, original protocol submitted this day. First amendment submitted this day. This is the third amendment submitted today. And by the way, the changes we are proposing are the follow. And they put a table. And that's very useful for the reviewers to know what are the changes are all about. Why are you doing it? What's the reason you have? In many instances, it's really useful if you can include the track changes. A document in red where the changes has been made and a clean document. It helps the reviewer, honestly, to cut and paste and put it in the review, but it saves them a lot of time to do that. And if you can do that for your own purposes, for us, it's very useful to have those 2 copies. And any other information you submitted, let's assume that you go on your protocol and you're going to increase the dose. And you submitted already your non-clinical study. Tell us where it was. Where is it? I do have a sponsor that submitted protocol changes. I'm looking the cover letter, but I cannot find it. Where are the protocol changes? It says, oh, by the way, we put it in Appendix A at the end of the document. It's fine. It's submitted. It will be useful if you can put it ahead, but it doesn't matter where it is. It's just for reading purposes. So when are you going to do a protocol change? Let's assume that you increase the drug dosage or duration of exposure. You will need to have some non-clinical information to support it. Tell us when it was submitted. If you're changing the number of the subjects that you're going to include. In that particular case, my statisticians will have to look at it and see if it meets its objectives, if you have enough power in your study to be able to draw the conclusions you want. In the design of the protocol, if you're changing the control group, if you're going to change you're going to do a double blind, and you're going to have a placebo, and you're going to change a placebo, we need to know what is the constitution of the placebo. So those are all elements that you need to be sending it in the protocol change. Or if you submitted it before, tell us, by the way, the non-clinical study that support the higher dose and duration was submitted on August 31st, 2015. So it's easy for my reviewers to go and look at them, and we can find it. Or if you got a new procedure, or if you change your protocol and instead of drawing blood samples at day 0, 14, and 28, you're going to do, I think that we're going to do a little different, and we're going to get it at 0, 7, 14, 21, and 28. Let us know what you changed, because that will help us to forward it, will help us. Will help the project manager to triage it and send it to the reviewers that needs to look at it. It's very not, those are the elements that you can have it. It's a requirement. No, it's not a requirement. The only requirement is you alert us that you submitted a protocol change. But if you can help us do our job much easier, we will really appreciate it. Designing protocol control group. So those are elements that you will change your protocol and you send it to the agency. Again, when you change your protocol, you can implement the change as you submit the protocol to the FDA, and you had the receipt that was submitted in the FedEx package that you sent to the central document room in Beltsville, and your protocol has been approved by the IRB. Your IRB approves the protocol. The FDA does not approve INDs. And again, with the caveat that it's written in the regs that if you are going to intend to change the protocol to increase the safety of the patient, eliminate a hazard, or implement it immediately, notify this. You can submit it, start changing the protocol, but you can submit it later to the agency. You notify the IRB. As a suggestion, if you are finding that you're going to have this problem, that there is a hazard immediate hazard to the subject that you need to implement it immediately, pick up the phone and call us. Let us know. Send an email. Talk to your project manager. We're going to contact the review team or the clinical or whoever needs to look at it. Keep the lines of communication open. It's really important for that. And the protocol amendment is if you're going to change a new investigator. Again, that comes with a 1571, and it's electronic now, so you can complete it in electronic format. And new investigator, once the investigator is added, the drug can be shipped to the investigator. It's not a problem. And because investigators are changed quite often or not, you can collect all the investigators you change in a whole month and send us one submission per month of all the investigators who have been added or dropped from your study. But that has to be done in 30 days notifications. Can be done in 30 days. The new investigators, we need to have the name, qualifications to conduct the investigation, and if they are participating in other protocols or not, and any information that we need. You can submit also the form FDA 1572. Are you aware of that form? It's another form that FDA has that is the qualification of the investigator. Some divisions require it. It's not a requirement, but you need to have it in your file, the 1572, in case you have an inspection later, but my colleagues that come later in the afternoon. And there is an information sheet to clarify what needs to be included, how to include, and this is the information. All this comes to us, we look at it, we triage, give it to the people who needs to look at it. In essence, if you change your protocol, the project manager is not reviewing the protocol itself. We just give it to the clinical or the chemistry or the pharm talks or the non-clinical, whoever needs to look at it. So we are done with the clinical amendment. So in essence, the timelines are the following, and this is the main things to remember in all the slides is if it's new protocol or protocol change, you can submit before implementation. Submit, just send it to us. Don't wait the 30 days or any subsequent, not the first one. But a new investigator or updated information on the investigator can be sent one time every 30 days. I'll be honest with you, this presentation is a little bit more boring than the previous one, but what can I do? You can also send to us something that is called information amendments. Anything that changes along the way that is not necessarily a protocol or a change in protocol or a change in an investigator that's going to do the protocol. For example, you can send, you completed a new clinical trial, a new toxicology study, and you need to submit it to the agency. You send it as an information amendment. You are sending to us an audited final study report on a non-clinical study. That will go as an information amendment. You are changing the source of your active pharmaceutical ingredient, API. So let us know who is the new source. You are changing the way you manufacture your placebo. Let us know. You discontinue the investigation. And this is a tricky one. What do I mean by that? You in this particular case, will be happening many things. You decided to stop your clinical investigation because preliminary results don't show any efficacy, for example. Or I had a case not too long ago of a clinical institution who has been conducting studies of one of the drugs in retinoblastoma. It's very serious eye condition. And we get a notification that says, we stopped any investigation. We saw a series of adverse events that we cannot assess now if they were related to the indication or not, the status of the patient. So at this moment, we communicated to the IRB, and we are putting ourselves not enrolling anymore until we evaluate the data and see where we go from here. If the adverse events were related to the drug, the adverse events were related to the indication, and we estimate that we're going to finish our evaluation in 30 days, 60 days, whatever you deem appropriate. They send this information to the file. The sponsor rightfully so sent me an email and told me, this is what's going on. I'm submitting you the information today and describe in an email. It's a safety issue. I just send it to my team. And because it was a confounded situation, and part of the adverse event they saw could have been related to the disease itself. We took a wait and see approach, and the sponsor is doing the right thing, is putting they don't put on hold, but they're waiting for any other investigation, and we waited. I had a tickler in my calendar. The medical officers had a tickler in her calendar. By day 30, they submitted the evaluation that would happen, and their evaluation was probably the disease itself is what caused the adverse events. Our clinical reviewer, agree with them and says we intend to resume dosing at the lower level in such and such a day, and the protocol is going to be revised. And that's fine. Just let us know what happened. But they continued the investigation. But we didn't put them on clinical hold. A different case to see some kind of variation in that. A sponsor for the transplant product called us, and they say we're stopping our investigation because we don't see any efficacy. Well, a lack of efficacy in a transplant product means that the patient is going to lose the graft. And if the patient is losing the transplanted organ, that translates in a safety issue. It's not just an efficacy. And in that case, we call the sponsor, and we put the sponsor in clinical hold. So they cannot conduct studies with that drug until it's determined that we can figure out what happened and what is the dose and why the people lost the graft. Why was not efficacious? Maybe they were using a lower dose. Maybe they needed to use a higher dose. Maybe the drug was not working. It was never determined, this IND, that particular IND is still on clinical hold. So what I'm trying to say is nothing is black and white. And depending on the particular therapeutic area you're working, the risks are going to be higher than others or not. But anytime you have a discontinued investigation, let us know. And call the project manager, send them an email. Whenever your IND comes and you have the acknowledgement letter, they will say who's the project manager. And they should be able to talk to you. There are two other things that can fall under information amendment is a request for comment, or if you have specific questions. There's no guarantee that we'll answer immediately to those. My recommendation, if you send an information amendment, no matter what it is, you put the IND number, submission serial number 0055, the name of who do you answer, and reference, put there in the front of the cover letter, what are you expecting the agency to do with that? Requests for comments, requests for additional information, notification of study suspension. In my recommendation, put it in bold, and if possible, one font size larger. So it brings to the project manager's attention. We are the people who triage and say, oops, there's an issue that needs to be alerted somebody. And put it there so let us know. Yes, many times the sponsor tells us the whole story about the project, and at the end, the last sentence says, by the way, we would like comments if possible. Put it at the front. Let us know what you want from us, and we will try. I cannot guarantee you that all the division will provide comments. I can assure you that my division will. That's as far as I can go. But I cannot tell my neighbor how to water their lawn. Anyway, let's switch gears and talk about safety reporting regulations. This is a very difficult topic, and it's very specific. And the medical officers are in charge of reviewing all the IND safety reporting. I'm bringing this here because this is one of your requirements, and I will give you a 30,000 feet high view of this. First guidance requirement for expedited reporting under an IND is very, very detailed. I guess there is a 50 pages guidance that goes in depth of in each one of the cases what to do or not. I'm not the subject matter expert in that, but I'm going to give you what we need from the project manager and the agency. If you have any questions or not, have a question. But again, look at those three if you are in charge of that. I know that pharmaceutical companies have a whole group of people in charge of safety reporting. But if you are an investigator, and Fair and I will talk to you about later on how to use it. And some of my slides will tell you if you're an investigator how to report those. Again, when I talk to one of my medical officers, I tell, I'm reading this guidance, 50 pages, what do I need to remember? And she tells me, you need to remember the words SUSAR. It's like Susan, but SUSAR. And this is what requires expedited reporting. Has to be serious, has to be unexpected, has to be suspected adverse event or adverse reaction. And I'm going to go to each one of them in a very broad sense without going into too much details, but it has to be a SUSAR. So, in order to do that, an adverse event is any medical occurrence where there is associated or not considered to the drug. The person is driving the car and hits the tree. That's an adverse, could be a person who is enrolled in a clinical trial is driving to decide where they need to receive the second injection or draw blood after 24 hours, 72, 98 hours, and drives the car, passes out, hits the tree. That's an adverse event. I don't know if it's associated or not. Somebody will eventually make that determination in the next one. But in essence, could be an unfavorable, in a best case scenario, will be an unfavorable sign, like enzymes are higher, and not too high, but they're a little bit elevated, or the symptom associated with the disease is get hives. It's possible. And does not imply any judgment on if the drug is about causality. You know, we cannot make it. It's an adverse event, general, big adverse event. However, the suspected is in the case when there is a reasonable possibility that the drug caused the adverse event. And this is where the judgment calls comes. For FDA reporting, the investigator is responsible for making the casualty and provide this assessment to the sponsor. The patient came here, had elevated liver enzymes. They reported to the sponsor. And the sponsors will look at it in the bigger, broader context of what the other investigators are doing. If you are an investigator and you are the sponsor, you need to make the determination and say, well, I think that is related to the drug, or I don't consider this related to the drug. And the sponsor is the one who determines the reportability of the agency. If you're an investigator and you see that a person was driving a car, passed out and hit the tree, you report that and you can tell the sponsor, maybe yes, I consider that that is not drug related. But the sponsor might have probably received many of those cases from other investigators that people were passing out, not necessarily hitting a tree, but people were passing out or they were falling. And sponsor responsibility, in conjunction with looking at all the cases, will make an assessment and say, okay, is it drug related or not drug related? And the sponsor is the one who will have to submit to us the safety reporting. Okay, remember that I said SUSAR, suspected, unexpected, adverse reaction. Adverse reaction, by definition, anything that is unexpected, serious, or life-threatening. And serious is any cases where it's life-threatening, requires a patient hospitalization. Those cases where it's serious is listed in one of the forms that I'm going to go later on, that is the MedWatch form. Incapacity, congenital anomaly. Hopefully you don't get any one of those difficult serious when you are conducting your study. Unexpected is when it's not listed in the investigator brochure. It's something that never happened before. You cannot predict, and you did not communicate that as a sponsor. You were not able to communicate that to your investigators. Or it's not listed with the specificity or severity the way it's listed. There was a case in the guidance that says that it says brain. It was talking about the case of brain anomalies. But if your study shows that instead of brain anomalies, you get brain ischemias, it's more specific, and you need to do it. And it's not consistent with the risk information that is listed in your investigational plan. Life-threatening is very specific and doesn't have any doubts on what is life-threatening. In essence, this is the best scheme I was able to find in between adverse events, suspected adverse event, and adverse reaction. And usually the amount of adverse reactions group or events is so much smaller in the all particular adverse events that you can find. here comes to what I'm looking as a project manager. Well, you need to be responsible for the file. Sponsor must report within 7 days, the sponsor, and if you're an investigator, you are the sponsor too, any unexpected and related life fatal or life-threatening events. Usually done by telephone, very seldom is by telephone now, or they send the fax, or you send it to the file. But if you have in paper, just send the fax to us. We take the fax and take it to the document room. And it's usually a 7-day report will be followed by a 15 safety update. The sponsor needs to submit no later than 15 days after one single event that is uncommon and known to be strongly associated with drug exposure. While reading the guidance, and I'm not a physician, so my clinical expertise is not great, but what falls in that category will be Stevens-Johnson syndrome. It's usually associated with the use of the drug, but not necessarily. Not all the drugs present Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Or one or more occurrences of an event that is not commonly associated with drug exposure, but is uncommon in the population. This case, for example, happened when we were getting all the adverse events from tendinitis and tendon ruptures with the use of quinolones. Were not expected. The people were runners, exercising. What would you expect that they break the tendon? But that was associated with the use. And there was a whole big change in the labeling of the quinolones. Or a specific observed in a clinical trial that when the sponsor does an evaluation or a midterm evaluation, sees that the drug is, the adverse event is more prominently shown in the drug exposed group than in the placebo. And this is what the sponsor needs to submit no more than 15, or any observation that they figure out by reading in guidances or by reading in literature about in vitro or animal studies. So the initial reporting is immediately, but no later than 7 days, and as soon as possible, but not later than 15 calendar days, any SUSAR, serious unexpected suspected adverse reaction, or observations from the animal studies. There is follow-up reporting and information that you obtain later on, submitted no later than 15 days. If it's day 16, we're not checking, but it's 15 days requirement. These IND safety reports are to be submitted in what is called 3500 form, MedWatch form, but the variation A, if it's from a clinical trial, or you can submit it in the narrative format. I think that the form 3500 without the number is for patients who use that and have that as post-marketing. Always send it with a 1571, and in the 1571 mark that you are including a MedWatch form, and which one is the report that you're sending, and there is a qualification, what title that you need to use. If you don't type it exactly the same way, we'll still accept it. The sponsor needs to submit additional IND safety reporting, not just the SUSARs. And we need to find findings from other studies. You're conducting studies in 3 different indications, and you notice that there are certain adverse events very noticeable when you administer the drug in a pill form for rheumatoid arthritis, but you're using the same drug for ophthalmic and it's in drops. Send us the information you have. We'll make the assessment if it relates or not, or how does it affect our indication. Findings from animal, increased rate of occurrence, and whatever you suspect that there is a significant risk of human exposed to the drug. And in that case, the sponsor will be required also to modify the informed consent or the investigator brochure. And communications with the division, you will figure out how to do that. There are 2 guidances. One is for reporting on INDs and bioequivalent studies for small companies, entities, and also in case you conduct bioequivalence and bioavailability studies. At one point, there was no requirement to submit adverse events for BA or BE studies, but now you need to report those too. This is consolidated in 10 slides, what could be a half-a-day course. So understand that this is not I didn't go into depth because it's not my area of expertise, but I wanted to share with you some of the elements on the safety reporting that you need. In the sponsor need to submit also annual reports on the calendar of your IND, 60 days, and you need to send us information what happened in the previous year. What did you do? How many patients enrolled? What adverse events that you noticed? Did you change the formulation? Are there any other non-clinical study that showed up that you need to do that? And it can be a 55 pages document, or for individual investigators, can be as simple as 2 pages document, letting us know what happened. It has to be in summary. You can do it in a table. You can put it in narrative. Submit the summary of the safety report, specifically the SUSARs you find, list of subjects who died or the people who dropped out of the study. And also, what is your intention to, all the preclinical, all the information that we can find information important, and what you're planning to do the next year. What is the intention? You are only enrolled 15 patients out of 50, or you plan to enroll the next patients that you will have. You will change the protocol, hoping to add another protocol for a multiple dose. And any other issues that can log outstanding issues that agency owes you the minutes of the meeting, or the agency owes you, or the agency needs to send you comments on the protocol you send. And important also, if the product was approved in a foreign study, if it, the drug is possible that was approved in Europe before it was approved in the US or in Japan, let us know what happened with the foreign marketing of your product. This annual report needs to be submitted within 60 days of the anniversary date that the application went into effect. So if you submitted your IND on January the 1st, let's assume that it's not January. You submit your IND August the 1st, right? August is 31 days, right? So it will become an effective 30 days after. It will be August the 30th. So you have 60 days after that. So August, September, October. So no later than October the 30th of the following year, you need to submit the annual report. And we track it. It needs to be included with the Form 1571. And if in my division, if you don't send it, we'll send you a very nice letter reminding you that you need to send us the annual report. Please, in that annual report, when you send it, make sure that you update the 1571. Because if you change buildings and they remodel your building and the building that you're located now, instead of being B55, is B32, we don't know that. And the letter will go to B51, and you will never receive the letter that we send you telling you, hey, by the way, submit the annual report, and if you don't submit the annual report, we'll terminate your IND. So keep us updated. Make sure that you update the 1571. Important in this one, what is the key of the 1571? I do have time because I want to emphasize the importance of the information you submit in the 1571. Recently, one of a sponsor who had 3-4 INDs calls me frantic on the phone. And he says, I have a problem. I need you to help me. And it's okay. Tell me what is the problem. This physician had 3-4 INDs in-house, and he was doing his research in an institution located in the East Coast of the United States. I'm not going to go which one of them. And he was submitted, and he was the sponsor of the IND, Dr. So-and-so. And he got into problem with that institution, and I don't know what the problem is. It's not my issue, but he moved to another institution in Mountain Time. And he says, sponsor in the East Coast locked me out of all the information I had because I left the institution in the data. I don't know what negotiation he had with his data, but the institution that I'm now in Mountain Time wants my data and wants to know what it is. And they think that they own my data. He says, will you give them that information? I don't want you to give them that information. It's mine. It does not belong to the institution. And I assured the doctor, I said, let me ask you a question. Who is the sponsor of your application listed in the 1571? He Is you or the academic institution in the East Coast or the Mountain Time? He says, no, I am the one. I am in the 1571. Say, well, let me double check. I searched in all the submissions that this doctor did, that there were not so many, but maybe 15, 20. And I looked at each one of the 1571s. And in the 1571, actually was the individual investigator. He was listed in all. The only thing is change the address. But he was the sponsor. So I told doctor, rest assured, the only person I can communicate any information or share any information is the person listed as the sponsor of this IND. You did correct in sending all the time the information and updated 1571. So if any other person comes and call me and tell me, can I have the information? Did the doctor submit this? Can you get this? I cannot share because it's all confidential. And the only person I can share this information is with the individual investigator. It's important that the 1571 reflects exactly who is the sponsor and the address. If you move, we cannot communicate if the address is incorrect. Send us a letter, we change the address, we reflect this is a simple letter, and we need to do that. Just my diatribe, I don't know. Okay, if you're not going to, you're no subject entering for 2 years, or is the application is in clinical hold for 1 year or longer, it may be inactivated by the agency. If you're not conducting any trial, or you don't get any money, or you put the information and submitted the IND and later didn't get any kind of source of funding, you can inactivate. If you inactivate the IND, it remains inactive. You don't need to submit annual reports. However, if for literature references you find some information on preclinical trials, you submit it. Or if you find more developments and the drug you were studying here in the US under an IND was approved in Japan, send us information that it was approved in Japan and put it part of the file. An IND that remains inactive for 5 years may be terminated by the FDA. And it's a may. A lot has to do with resources and timing. And you can request a withdrawal of your IND, and it's withdrawn. The IND is still with us. The information can be accessed. But at that moment, you can tell us, you know, I'm not going to do any more trial. The trial was finished. The drug was approved. I don't have any more patients to enroll. And by the way, I alerted all the investigators. There's no drug more available. The drug was not withdrawn. I don't withdraw this IND because of reasons of safety. And we'll send you a very nice letter telling you we acknowledge the withdrawal of the IND. The information on the IND is still there. We have it. It did not disappear. It didn't go into a black hole. Probably it's not in the same building we are now and it's sent to another building or the Federal Record Center. But we can always request it and access it. Any questions? We have 6 seconds.
Thank you.